Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts Thin Coats with me, Phil, the Glacial Geek. Today we are going to be talking about flyers and kind of how to handle them, what to do about them, just talking about how there's a big fear with the meta now. Everyone's afraid that there's going to be 5 Storm Ravens in every single list, and that's the impossible way to beat them, and that's just the way it's going to be, and that's just the way the competitive meta is going. To put it shortly, I disagree. I don't think that's the way it's going to be. I think that you're going to see a lot of different things going on. Oh, sorry, I forgot to put that in there. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of different things going on in there, and I think that I think a lot of the fear is a little overblown. So let's get into that. While we're talking about it, I'm going to be finishing up painting my Corvus Black Star. This thing was a ton of fun to paint. I tried some new things. I don't know if you could see on the lenses there, which was kind of an interesting little bit. And yeah, this was a ton of fun to paint. It was really it didn't take an exceptionally long time. It took probably about a couple hours worth of solid effort to make it happen. And the fun thing is, a lot of the extra weapons and stuff, they just they pop right on, which is nice. Well, these ones might not. Well, yeah, they do. Yeah, they just kind of like sit on top like that, and then these weapons up front here, there's no need to glue them in and choose them. You can they just pop right in like that, which is nice, so that you can have all the options in the world, which is always fun. These I tried to magnetize, they didn't work as well, so I just went with those ones, and I'll just determine as I go along which one they're going to represent, and I don't care if that one's not exactly WYSIWYG. It's easy enough to tell because it's just missiles. So that's what I'm going to be working on as I go along, and it's just going to be interesting. So let's get into it. So flyers. Everyone's talking about how all the people I see on there are talking about the ATC tournament that they came up with. There was a ton of people with 5 flying hive tyrants, I almost said, which was the meta back in the last edition. But it was 5 Storm Ravens in a list, and people saying it's just unbeatable. They were really good. They won, so therefore that's the new meta. There's nothing that can do to beat them. But I think that don't get me wrong, I definitely think they're strong. I think Storm Ravens are very powerful in this edition. I think they're definitely worth taking in a list. I just don't think that a 5 Storm Raven list is going to be as super successful in a lot of major tournaments as other lists can possibly do. So let's kind of go over why. So a 5 Storm Raven list, the reason it's so strong is that they're a good vehicle. They're very, they're toughness 7, they're 12 wounds. They got a lot going for them. They've got a lot of weapons on them. They've got a lot of the whatchamacallits. They've got twin multi-meltas, they've got twin assault cannons, they've got hurricane bolters. They've got a lot of DACA that they can throw down the board, and decently strong DACA too. But at the same time, and they also are very fast. I mean, they're flyers. They move minimum 20 versus like a maximum of 14 for bikers. So they're very fast. They can get around the board. They can get in your face really quick, and they're able to throw their DACA where they want them to go. But along those same lines, a lot of their weaponry that they have is pretty short range. Assault cannon is 24 inches. Same thing with the multi-melta. Same thing with the hurricane bolters. So if they want to throw that DACA at you, they can't just sit back in a corner and shoot it at you. They've got to get all up in your face, which they can do easily enough with their speed, but that also means that they're leaving behind a lot of their guys who buff. You know what I mean? Because nowadays, if you're in a transport, you don't give off that buff. You have to be out on the table, because when you're in a transport, you don't count as being on the table, and therefore your buff doesn't count. So you can't just like carry around a buff inside of you. That doesn't work. So if they want to go with buffs, which I think are super powerful in this edition, getting rerolls or getting bonuses to hitting or bonuses not to be hit, whatever it might be, they're going to have to stick around and follow along with those people. Or they're going to have, because especially now that you can't just like fly up unload them and then shoot with them and then drop, bring them back in the next turn. They have to stick around, and they've got to stay back with them if they want to get those buffs, or if they don't want to get those buffs, they just want to get up in your face, which is another possible tactic that they can run. They're free to do that, but they're going to be doing it on their own, which they can do. They're going to be powerful enough for that. But with that, you have to understand that now you have a vehicle that's all up in your face, and oops, that fell over. That was not great. Now you have a vehicle that's all up in your face, and they aren't anything super strong compared to other vehicles. They've got the same toughness as a Rhino. They've got the same, they've got, one more wound than a Predator, and they cost a lot of points. Like, you're not getting a whole lot of them onto a list. You're getting 5. Isn't that what the new thing is? It's 5. You can get 5 of them on the list, and that's what they'll be able to use, and that's what they'll be able to shoot you with. But then they're shooting you with that DACA. They're all up on there on their own. And now that flyers only get a -1 to hit with the hard to hit ones, you've got the fact that now they've got the hard to hit. They're only -1 to hit. So now all of my Space Marine vehicles are still going to be hitting them on 4s. And if I've got Azrael right next to him, next to my Predators, they're re-rolling that. So most of the time they're going to get some las cannon shots on there. And those las cannon shots are going to quickly take them down and make them less effective as they go. And a lot of people are saying, it's like, well, they're going to put them down, they're going to get first turn. Yeah, but ITC already kind of took care of that when they made the fact that being the first to place all of your models gives you a +1 on the roll. It doesn't make it guaranteed like it was before. So now you have a list that you've got these flyers that if you want to put them there within range of my las cannons, you're possibly going to get shot up first turn with all those las cannons, and they're going to go down. Yeah, there's 5 of them, and yeah, I'm not going to be able to take down all 5 in one turn, but if I take down 1, if I take down 2, suddenly now your list is losing a big portion of its ability to function. And they're not going to be able to hang in there as long as a lot of other lists who have more redundancy, that have more to fall back on, Yeah, those multi-meltas can do a big deal of damage, but they have to be within 12 inches at that point if they want to do it. And if you're in 12 inches, I'm going to be able to shoot you with my multi-meltas. I'm going to be able to shoot you with anything that I've got. And I'm going to be shooting you with my las cannons as they're going, as you're coming down the board towards them. And suddenly your flyers are not as effective anymore, and they're not able to handle all of that heavy DACA. Because they're just vehicles at this point in this edition. They've got the -1 to hit, but that doesn't make a huge difference. You can get -1 to hit if you put a vehicle in cover and you get it 50% obscured. It's no longer a guarantee that flyers aren't going to get shot by regular things. Now everything can shoot at them with only a -1 penalty. There are going to be some armies that are going to struggle more and more with that. I could imagine that, with orc shooting, it's going to be a little difficult to take them down. I imagine with, with guardsmen shooting, that it might become a little bit difficult to take them down. But the benefit of both of those is that you've got a lot of shots. You're going to have a lot of DECA that's going to be shooting at them, shooting down the table at them, making a big difference in the amount of shots that you're going to be getting. Versus, the number of shots that you get as a Space Marine player. So keeping that all in mind, I don't think that they're going to be as untouchable as flyers were in the last edition. They go down a lot faster than they used to, and because of that, this list consisting of only flyers makes a lot of easy, target priority is pretty easy. You've got 5 flyers that you're taking out, And along those same lines, a lot of the missions that you're playing do require you to take and hold objectives, and if you're a flyer, yeah, you can hold an objective if you're by it, but then next turn, you've either got to drop into hover mode, in which case you lose that that -1 to hit, and you become an easier target to shoot at, or you keep flying off of the objective. And if I've got a list that's more of an all-comers kind of list, one that's able to handle all the different people, all the different types of lists that are going to be coming my way, then at that point I've got half my list that's going to be able to shoot you, and I've got half my list that's going to be able to have my list that's going to shoot you, and I've got half my list that's going to be able to jump on objectives and harry anything else that you've got around there. So yeah, Dante is going to be in there trying to give you rerolls, but he's only going to be by them towards the second or third turn. And suddenly my Vindicator has a pretty easy target that he's shooting at down there, you know, if he's trying to make his way down the board to help support your Storm Ravens. And I know 360 firing makes flyers a bit easier now that you don't have to worry about, you know, getting the directly facing against the enemy. And, you know, like I said, they're going to be tough. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy battle, but everyone, I keep saying that, but a lot of people on the internet are freaking out about them, thinking that these guys are now going to ruin the game, that this is the only thing you're going to see in tournaments. But ATC, that was a tournament, it was a team tournament where you got to you get to pick and choose your opponents, you know. And if you look at the other lists that were with the teams, they had more general all-comers lists that they could put down as the one that people chose against, and they could have a better chance of going into a situation that they can handle. Whereas the Storm Raven lists could then pick and choose the opponents that they wanted to try to squash with their abilities, and they could line things up that they could be stronger against. And it's true. I think that if you can choose, you know, I think that the Storm Raven list is definitely harkening back to the 7th edition rock, paper, scissors list, where you had a list that could do a lot of damage to this, but if it ran into something that wasn't that, it had a lot of trouble. So if you're playing rock, paper, scissors, and you know that your opponent is playing rock, your list that's paper is never going to lose. You know, if you can choose your opponent, having a list like the Storm Raven list is going to be nigh impossible to beat, because they're going to pick and choose who they want to play, and they're going to pick and choose the ability, how they're going to handle them. You know, and I think that they're become really strong. I think there's a lot of deck that they can throw down. It'll be very difficult if you don't have the ability to handle them. But if you make a list that can handle, that's designed to handle all comers, I think you can handle this list, because you pose them with multiple questions. Where are you going to focus on the units that I have running out and taking objectives? Are you going to focus on my units that are shooting you? If you're focusing on my units that are shooting you, I'm holding them way back in my table edge, and you're going to have to come down and try to get me. And if you're going to come down and get me, you're leaving all of your support network behind you, because you've got 24-inch range on your weapons. You know, I've got 48-inch range. I've got twice as long range on my las cannons as you do on your multi-meltas and your assault cannons. And with that in mind, I think that you're going to have situations that those flyers are going to run into in regular tournaments where you don't get to choose, especially the bigger ones where you're playing 5 or 6 games in a tournament. The odds are you're going to run into a list that you're not as well suited to handle, you know? And if that becomes the case, you've only got 5 models at that point that are trying to jump on objectives and not doing as well. Because if you go down into hover, suddenly those hordes can swarm you, and they can just beat you up, you know? If you don't go into hover, if you just stay in hypersonic, you're going to have a hard time getting around to those objectives, only turning 90 degrees at a time, trying to make sure that you're within 20, you know, that you move your 20 inches and don't crash, you know, don't crash and burn and don't fly off the table because of bad decision making with jumping on those objectives. And if you're playing those kind of games and you're playing a situation where you don't have the luxury of choosing who you're going up against, I think you're going to have more trouble than they had at the ATC. You know, and I think we'll see it going further on as we see more and more of these tournaments coming up. And I know that a lot of people are talking about this as the land of spam, but I think a lot of people went into this edition looking to create spam lists, you know, and I think that those spam lists are pretty powerful. They can do a lot of stuff, but they're not going to be as super effective, I don't think, as an all-comers list, because all-comers lists aren't designed to table your opponents. You're not going to have a lot of these, you know, people coming in with all-comers lists being like, oh, I tabled my opponent turn 2. No, you're not going to table an opponent with an all-comers list. But what you are going to do is you're able to jump on objectives, you're able to play towards the game, and you're still going to have DACA to handle all the different kinds of armies that are coming towards you. So if you have the situation where you're playing up against a horde, if you've got the ability to handle, to throw a bunch of shooting down the board, if you've got some flamers or you've got some hurricane bolters or storm bolters or whatever it is that you've got to throw a lot of shooting, you're going to be better able to handle those kind of situations. If you have a situation where you're playing against an armor list, If you've got las cannons, if you've got some heavy shooting, whatever it might be, that you're able to handle and shoot down the board to take care of them, you're going to do better. You're not going to table his list, but you're probably going to be able to hold out against them and put yourself in a position to win the game. So if I have an all-comers list and I go into a tournament, I know that regardless of what my opponent brings, I have a chance. I have an opportunity to handle it, you know? And the dice will decide what they decide, and my tactics versus their tactics are going to decide what they're going to decide. But when I go into the game, I know that I have a chance against every single list. Whereas I think those flyers are going to have lists that they go into that they have a lot more questions about than other lists, you know? And I think that's just the reality when you have those kind of lists. Whenever you have spam lists, whenever you have these like mono unit lists, most of the units in the game are designed to handle a few things. You know what I mean? The las cannon isn't meant to handle a 50-man conscript squad. You know what I mean? A flamer isn't meant to handle a whole bunch of land raiders. You know, the reality is everything in the game is designed to really handle kind of a nucleus of enemies, handle a nucleus of situations, and a lot of the situations that you're going to see yourself coming into in a tournament is a variety of them. And if your list doesn't have multiple tools to handle all of those multiple opponents, you're going to have a hard time making it through all of the rounds in a tournament and still be the winner. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. I think they're going to do well. I think they'll win a lot of games, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of the top lists in the major tournaments that we're going to see coming up and over the next year with 8th edition being that kind of one-choice spam lists. You know, I think a lot of people, you know, you see a lot of anger over them because they see these lists and they're like, well, that's crap, that's cheese, who cares about that? And it's like, well, whatever. You either have to learn to handle it or you just don't play in those kind of situations. And if you don't play in those situations, that's fine, that's your choice. But, you know, you don't have to, you know, get down on other people for choosing that they want to play in those kind of situations. You know what I mean? I go into a tournament expecting to see things like that. I expect to see lists that people are trying to bring the hardest, heaviest hitting list that they can possibly take. But I've been talking to some of my friends, and they went into 8th edition looking to spam things. I had a friend who was Grey Knights, and he went in and he was like, yep, I am going to spam the crap out of Dread Knights. He's just like, they're strong, I think they're just going to be super powerful. But he played in the tournament and had a lot of trouble with it because he ran into situations that they just weren't prepared to handle. You know, I went into my first tournament and I was like, I'm bringing 3 las predators because I just want to throw all those las cannons down there. I'm going to make this like this chunk of killer Asriel supported nastiness, and that's what I'm going to go for. That's what my personal meta is going to be. And I went into that first tournament and I did well against Inari, and I did well against a Dread Knight spam list, and I lost to an Orc Horde list because my list didn't have enough DACA to handle all of those guys, to handle all of that, nastiness that was going to come my way. So I was left with a situation where I could either, you know, decide that, well, that's just the reality of my situation. I'm going to keep going and hope I don't run into a Orc list, or I could go into the situation saying, well, you know what? I'm going to change things. So I've started to change things around. I think my list has gotten stronger. I think my list has gotten better. And because of that, I think that I'm going to be better able in tournaments to handle stronger lists. You know, and I still have 2 las predators. So with those 2 las predators, I still think I'm going to be able to handle, you know, I definitely think I'm still going to be able to handle lists like the Storm Raven one. You know, I think I'm going to be able to handle most anything. Honestly, I've just thrown in a lot more DACA. I'm going with more Hurricane Bolters if I can. So I've got a Land Raider Crusader going in my list. And what I've discovered, and I think a lot of people are discovering, is that, you know, spamming things only goes so far when you have to handle everything that a tournament might throw your way. You know, if you can pick and choose your opponents, like I said with the ATC, for instance, then yeah, spamming works, because what you want to do is you want to have a spam list, you want to have a spam army, so that you can pick and choose the right spam army to handle those situations. You know, so if someone comes at you with a whole bunch of predators, throwing in your Orc Horde or your you know, 3,000 conscript list, and suddenly you've got you know, a matchup that favors you. You know, but if you can't choose that and you have that 3,000, you know, conscript squad and conscript list, and suddenly you run up to someone who has, like, they run into a salamanders list with like a dozen heavy flamers, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. You know, a dozen heavy flamers and a Vindicare, so the Vindicare's popping off your commissar and hitting you with all those heavy flamers. Those conscripts are gonna fall real quick. You know, so I think that the best list you're going to see coming out, and I think that you see a lot of people are figuring these out, that the best lists you're going to see going forward are definitely going to be the lists that can handle everyone else's list. You know what I mean? Because you're going to have situations, you're going to run into in a tournament, you're kind of run into all sorts of lists, all sorts of different tactics, different armaments, different kinds of armies, and if you can't handle all of them, then you're not going to do well in the tournament. You know, or you might do so well until you run up into the ones that you can't handle, and then you're going to lose. You know what I mean? So it's going to limit the kind of the top level that you can really reach in a tournament because of your inability to handle all the different lists that your opponents might be bringing. So yeah, so flyers I think are tough. I think they're strong, but I don't think they're unbeatable, and I don't think they're worth, you know, declaring that the sky is falling because of them. You know what I mean? And you know, I know a lot of people have said, like, numbers say that, you know, they're going to be able to handle all these different things, and that's true. You know, I don't like, I'm not saying that they're weak. I'm not saying that they're pointless, but I think you'd be a lot stronger if you brought 1 or 2 Storm Ravens and, say, a Laspred, or you brought 2 Storm Ravens and a whole bunch of tactical Marines to go spread out on the board. You know what I mean? At that point, you've got the ability to handle hordes, you've got the ability to jump on objectives, you've got the ability to harass someone so that they're not just focusing on your Storm Ravens, and then your Storm Ravens can do what Storm Ravens do and be awesome, but not just have your one kind of shot that you can go in there and take care of. You know, I think that the lists going forward will probably still have Storm Ravens, because I think flyers are very strong in this edition. I just don't think that only flyers are going to be able to handle the situation. One of my recent battle reports, I had Genestealer Cult. You know what I mean? Where it's mostly the strength of the Genestealer Cult is their ability to assault, their ability to kind of get in your face and take you out. And I ran into an opponent who brought a Storm Raven and 2 Storm Talons. So there was a whole bunch of flyers on there, but I was able to take it down to the very end. He ended up tabling me turn, I think 4 or 5 or something like that. But it was only after a lot of strength, and I took strength that it took a lot to take him down. You know what I mean? I took down 2 of his flyers, the 2 Storm Talons, and I had the Storm Raven hurting. And you know, it just kind of goes to show you that, yeah, flyers are strong this edition, but they're not impossible to handle. Especially in that list, that setup was very strongly edged towards him. You know what I mean? But I was able to manage to pull it out, and I was able to win. Or not win. I was able to keep it a tough game, and you know, if a couple things went different ways, it could have easily gone my way. You know, so it just kind of goes to show you that, you know, I don't think that the mono builds are going to be as strong in this edition as people are fearing them to be. I don't think the mono builds are going to be just like the meta killers that everyone thinks they're going to be. I think that they're going to be strong. I think you're going to see a lot of them. But I don't think that they're going to make it impossible for other armies to handle. You know what I mean? Because every army has their ability to put up some strong DECA. You know what I mean? Even with the Genestealer Cult, I brought my Cult Leman Russ, which is throwing up a las cannon and a battle cannon. And he did a great job of target priority and taking that out. But if I had more than just one, he probably would have had a lot more difficulty. You know what I mean? That first turn, I would have been able to throw 2 sets of Leman Russes at him. I would have been able to, if after he focused fired and took down one of my Leman Russes, I could have focused fired with, I could have returned the favor with the other Leman Russ. You know? So I think, and you know, and my list was skewed towards the assault, which makes it a difficult setup for me to handle. But that doesn't make it mean that it's because flyers are impossible. It means that I didn't make a list that was properly able to handle the different kind of enemies that they had coming their way. So I think if you look at the situation, yeah, flyers are strong. Don't get me wrong. I think they're going to be very powerful. I think you're going to see a lot of them in this edition. I'm excited about them. I mean, I'm painting up one for my Death Watch here, but I don't think that they are going to be the killers of the meta. I don't think they're going to have. I don't think the only winners of these tournaments are going to be. I don't think the only winners are going to be those guys. I think you're going to see a lot more people bringing a lot more varied lists, and I think you're going to see those varied lists performing well in tournaments where you have a bunch of different opponents and you don't get to choose who your opponent's going to be. You know, so you know, congratulations to those guys coming up with that kind of the first ones who came up with that concept. I think it's a pretty awesome concept. You know, I think it's going to do well, but I don't think you're going to see the top players at ITC, at LVO or at Nova actually winning the tournament with those lists. You know, they might. Who knows? If you look out with who does well in those tournaments, you might end up with the matchups that you want as you keep going up and up in the ranks. But I just think that the odds are against you getting all of the ideal matchups that you really want when you've got a kind of mono list like that. So and I think the same thing goes for any other list. Like if you've got an orc horde, yeah, just having 1,000 orc boys running at you is going to be pretty powerful. But you're going to do better if you have some trucks or you have a Morkanite or something else to help provide some fire support. Flash gits or something, providing some kind of fire support, some stronger fire support that they can use to take out some of your heavy hitters, some of your opponent's heavy hitters as you start to run your boys up there, because eventually you're going to take casualties, and if you don't have a list that can handle everything that your opponent's throwing at you, like I said, you're going to have trouble, and you're going to be hoping versus trying. You're going to be having situations where you've got to hope for things to go your way versus making them go your way with tactics and gameplay. So just keep that in mind. I don't think the sky's falling when it comes to these guys. I don't think the sky's falling when it comes to flyers. I don't think that we're in a situation where they're going to be the only thing you're going to see on tournament tables. But I do think that I do think they're strong. I do think you're going to see a bunch of flyers. But the best ones that are going to utilize the flyers are going to be the ones that use them in conjunction with a bunch of other. Are going to be the ones that use them in conjunction with a bunch of other tactics and a bunch of other units, so that they work together as an army to handle all of the different opponents that are going to be coming your way. So just keep that in mind. I don't think it's worth freaking out over. I don't think it's the end of the world. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me about that, and that's a fair thing. They did really well at the ATC. I just think that they're going to do not as well when they can't choose their opponents. I don't think they're going to do as well when you can't keep them away from things that are going to be that are going to make them struggle. And I think that that's not to say anything about the players who played them. That's just to say something more, I think, about the list and the build, and kind of what I think is the abilities of that list and that build. I think there are limitations to what they can and cannot do. And if the dice gods decide what the dice gods decide, any list could win. If you roll as many ones as I do, Lord knows any list could lose. But I think like I said, a lot of those lists, a lot of the flyer spam, yeah, they look scary on paper. But I think when you start putting them in a tournament situation where people bring in a lot of different things and people are bringing a lot of different counters to what you bring, that you're going to end up in a situation where you're hoping for things to go your way. And with that in mind, I don't think I don't think hoping that you don't run into things is a solid way to win in this edition. I don't think it's a solid way to win in any edition, honestly. Like, I think that the list that did, there were a lot of real nasty lists in last edition, but the ones that did best were the ones that could handle more of a situation. So the Gladius, if you've got a lot of Razorbacks, you can handle most anything that's going to come your way. You know what I mean? If you have jet bike, even the jet bike spam from 7th edition, if you had those shuriken cannons, they could handle, or scatter lasers, they can handle most anything that was coming their way. So with that in mind, look in 8th edition, I think the best way to find a list in 8th edition is one that can handle a whole lot of things, because a lot of other things became a lot more viable. So you're going to see a lot more orc hordes, you're going to see a lot more conscript armies, and keeping that, and with that in mind, I think that you're going to either be able to, you're either going to have to learn to handle them and make a list that can handle all of those different types. You know, if you know, because if you make a list that can just handle hordes and you run up into 5 Imperial Knights, you know, even look at the Imperial Knights. That's what I think. I feel like this new Stormraven spam is like the Imperial Knights of last edition. That people are like, well, 5 Imperial Knights are just going to auto win. There's nothing you can do about it. They performed well, but they didn't always win. They didn't win a lot of tournaments because of the fact that they're very situational. You know, and if you put yourself with a situational army in a tournament setting that doesn't allow you to control the situation, you're going to be in a position that you're not going to be as strong to handle. So keeping that in mind, I think that yeah, flyers are tough, they're strong, but just shoot them with heavy deca. Shoot with anything. Anything can wound. You know what I mean? I had a bolt pistol take off a wound from a Baneblade chassis, which was pretty funny. And I think that, you know, if anything can wound anything, if you put enough shots into a Stormraven, it's going to go down. And if you've only got 5 Stormravens as the core of your army, eventually you're going to start really hurting as you lose more and more. Think about that. You know, if you've got 100 guys, 100 orc boys, and, you know, you lose 2 of them, you're not really hurting. But if you lose 2 Stormravens, that's really going to hurt. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of weapons out there that can put a lot of wounds onto things. Las cannons, meltas in general, are able to put a lot of wounds onto them, and because of that, you're able to have situations that very quickly those flyers are going to go down in effectiveness, and then eventually they're going to die. You know, they've got a 3-up armor save, they don't have an invul save, and, you know, they're going to eventually go down. They're eventually going to fail rolls, and they're eventually going to hurt, and they're going to, you know, go down. And when one of them goes down, that's 20% of their army right there. You know, it's a big deal. So if you can put it in there, I think that, you know, a lot of people saying they're always going to go first because there's only 5 drops that you're making. It's like, yeah, they'll probably go first. But ITC in the competitive scene has made it so that it's not auto go first when you do that. You get +1 to your roll. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's more likely that they're going to go because they've got that +1. They're winning ties at that point. But at the same time, they're not guaranteed to go first. And I think that list depends upon a lot of going first. It depends a lot upon having the targets that they can pick and choose from. And if you make a situation where they don't have the ability, that target priority becomes more of a struggle for them. If you make it a situation where they're not necessarily going first, if you make it a situation where they have to, if you can spread out around the board so they have to move a lot, I mean, yeah, they can move fast, but they're not really mobile. They can turn 90 degrees. They can't go backwards. If they do, they go into hover mode, and then they become easy targets for everybody. You know, they lose that -1 to hit, which in and of itself isn't super hard to overcome, you know, especially with a lot of armies out there having 3+ to hit. So, yeah, they're strong. Yeah, they're powerful. But I don't think that spamming flyers is the way forward in this edition. I think that using them as part of a cohesive army is going to be more advantageous to you doing well in this edition. So those are my thoughts on it. That's just kind of what I think about them. I think they're going to be strong. I think you're going to see a lot of flyers in this edition because they're fun and they're fast and they're brutal, and the fact that you can shoot 360 is really nice now. But I don't think spamming them is going to be the only way forward. I think right now we're in a situation where, I mean, the game's been out for what, like a month? Yeah, a lot of people went into 8th edition being like, what can I spam to win this game? That's why you saw it's like, that was every unit that would come out when they were first releasing the previews. They're like, well, that's it. You know, Guardsman spam is the only way forward. That's the only list they're going to do well. It's like, yeah, they do well, but they're not the only list going forward. You know, and it's like, oh, well, you know, Stormraven spam, that's the only way forward. Spam, 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 spam. Everyone keeps saying spam. And they're like, oh, this is the addition of spam. It's only the addition of spam because people are looking to spam as much as they can. You know, I know that the detachments make it easier to spam things than it used to. But I mean, there were always detachments in the previous edition that made it possible to spam things. You know, look at the jet bike spam from Eldar, or you know, or transport spam from the Gladius. You know, there was ways of spamming things in the last edition. There's ways of spamming things in this edition. Everyone can spam it. I think is the thing that scares people the most, is that you can take whole lists with just the things that you want, which I think a lot of armies didn't have that ability to do it. So now that they can, it kind of shocks them, and they kind of wonder about that. But I don't think that this is going to end up being the tournament, the addition of spam. I think people are going to settle back and settle down once a couple tournaments go through. I think after a couple more months of play, people are going to realize that the lists that do well are the ones that can handle everything. You know, that's been my experience. I've played a couple tournaments here, and the lists that do well are the ones that can handle everything. You know, and if you can handle everything, if you've got enough DACA to handle a horde, if you've got enough strength to handle vehicles and monsters, if you've got enough speed to jump on objectives, if you've got enough buffs to benefit your DACA, then you're going to do well. You know what I mean? But if you end up going with a mono list, you're going to run into situations that are just going to be they're just going to be very difficult to predict, and they're going to be very difficult to properly plan into a tournament. You know, and in the end, being able to plan for a tournament is what's going to win you a tournament. So if you can go into a tournament and go, I think I can handle most anything people are going to throw my way, you're going to do better in that tournament than if you go into a situation where you're like, as long as I don't have to face blah, I'm going to do well. Because, you know, especially as you go into the bigger tournaments, if you've got your local meta and no one's bringing a hard counter to your list, you can go into it pretty confidently. But once you get into the bigger tournaments where there's hundreds of people bringing hundreds of lists, and you're playing multiple rounds, you know, a lot of different rounds, you know, you end up with a situation where you're going to have to make decisions as to how you're going to handle it, and how you're going to go in a head-to-head with a lot of different things. And once that becomes the situation that you're facing, then what you're going to end up having is a list that's going to be able to handle more enemies than not, is going to do better than a list that's designed to handle and do well against a particular type of army. So, yeah, those are just some of my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but I'm just, even when I first saw that list, I wasn't super afraid, because I thought that my list that I currently have been running in tournaments would at least be able to have a chance against it. And don't get me wrong, I think it would be tough. I think it would be an uphill battle, but, you know, I don't feel like frightened to death by it. And I don't think that all these people crying about, that this is just only going to be spam available in this edition are right. I don't think they're right. I think that this edition holds itself more open to all comers lists than it used to. And I think that because of the wide variety of different armies that you see coming forward, that if your list isn't able to handle them, you're not going to do well. And because of that, you're going to have a lot of people taking a whole lot of different lists. And I think that you're going to see a lot of variety. And I mean, I've already seen a lot of variety in the tournaments that I've gone to. You know, I haven't gone to any big ones yet. You know, I still think that seeing the variety of lists out there, more so even than last edition. Last edition, it was like you choose your detachment, you choose your detachment and it told you what to bring. So you had a lot of lists that looked very similar, you know what I mean? And now, because of the way they've got detachments, everyone's choosing what they want to fill in the different slots, you know what I mean? And yeah, certain things are going to be better than others, and you're probably going to see more of them, but I don't think any one thing is going to dominate. I don't think any one thing is going to dominate the meta, because it's like, what do you prefer? Do you prefer las cannons or do you prefer missile launchers? You know, both are effective and both do different things. You know, you've got a little more versatility with the missile launcher. You've got a little bit more strength with the with the las cannon. But you know, you've got your options now. Whereas back in the day, it was you brought grav. You know, and I think that having that kind of that kind of openness and that kind of variety is what's gonna end up winning out in this edition. So, but let me know what you guys think down below. Have you faced off against the 5 Stormraven list? If so, let me know how it went. Let me know how you did, and if you did well against it, let me know what you did, what tactic you did, or what tactic you expect to use with your list to handle that kind of thing, because you're going to face some of these things because it's out there, and whether or not it wins big tournaments, people are going to bring it because they think it sounds strong, and they're going to do it. And that's the reality is that you're going to have to make a list if you're going to a tournament that can handle a 5 Flyrant list, 5 Stormraven list. You're going to have to handle, you know, your list is going to have to be able to handle a horde of 30,000 little Ghiblies coming at you with warriors giving them Synapse Fearless. Your lists are going to have to be able to handle, you know, 1,000 conscripts sitting on the objectives that you've got to trudge your way through. And if you don't have the ability to handle all those different lists, you're not going to do well at a tournament, you know? And at that point, that's not on the other people's list, that's on you. You know, you have to craft a list that's going to be able to handle all of those, because it's going to come down to how many lists can your list handle. And if your list can't handle things, then they're not going to do well. So if you want to go and get into the competitive scene, if you want to get into tournament scene, if you want to get into competitive Warhammer playing, then you're going to have to handle all of these different things. But I don't think that they're the end-all be-all to win. I just don't think so. I just don't see it happening. And I think that if you go into a situation with an open mind, and you go into a situation with your list prepared to handle anything, you're gonna do pretty decently. So let me know what your plan is. Let me know what your current competitive list is. I would love to hear what you guys are doing. I'd love to see what's going on, because I've been seeing a lot of different types of lists coming floating around with different options. Certain lists seem more, you know, I think you're gonna end up with a lot of lists that are skewed one way or the other, and you know, and that works because at that point you have opponents that you feel strongly that you can handle. And then as long as you've got the ability to handle some of the others, you know that you're not just going to get stomped by them, you know, and that's what it comes down to. If you can hold out and you can survive to the end, then you've got the ability to do well, and you've got the ability to possibly win, as long as you can, you know, survive it out. So, you know, even with the Stormravens, you know, I'd be surprised to see them handle, you know, 300 conscripts and on the table. You know, that's a lot of dudes that they'd have to try to kill off of objectives. And if you could just run them up there, sit them on the objectives with a commissar, you know, it's going to take a lot of DAC to take them out, because those multi-meltas are going to kill 2 guys each, you know. The assault cannon, the twin assault cannons are pretty good, but you know, that's 12 shots going down into them. And then you've got the storm bolters. You're throwing down 24 shots at that point between the 2 of them. You know, and that can get pretty brutal. But even then, you know, you've still got your saves, and if you've got anybody in there giving buffs, you know, you can make it through. You know, and put them in cover. You know, conscripts in cover is going to be real tough to break out of there. So let me know what you guys are doing. Let me know what you faced and what you think is scary. Let me know if you really do think that spam is the way of the future, because, you know, I disagree. I really don't think it's the way of the future. I don't think it's the way this edition is going to work out. I think this edition is going to require the ability to handle a far greater variety of opponents and a far greater variety of lists than previously. And if you're not able to, you're going to have trouble in tournaments. So I think because of the viability of all different tactics, I think that because of the viability of all different armies, that if your list isn't able to handle a lot of them, you're going to be in trouble. So let me know what you think down below. Keep the conversation going. I've really enjoyed what we've been doing to that. So yeah, I guess this thing has really turned out well. I've been excited about it. I might put some highlights, but I don't know, maybe highlights. I don't know. I'll make that decision in a bit. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and yeah, keep the conversation going. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed it. I certainly have. I have been Phil the Glacial Geek as always, and until next time, have fun.